I enjoyed the part of the very beginning of the project when, before we even started like the specs, we did a bunch of sound checks just for the space to see, what type of treatment we needed. I had to get my husband like going with the lawnmower outside.
Oh, yeah,
I did I had to wait for a thunderstorm. We did a recording during a thunderstorm. I made my husband and daughter scream and run around downstairs. So I just thought that was a really fun part of the project and not something I would have thought of, but custom.
Yeah, no, that's a really important part of it, the information gathering phase. And we have a good idea of how far we have to go with this project in terms of construction and design.
George the Tech.
Hey, everybody, George the Tech. And here is another installment in our series of what I call profiles. And profiles are just videos where I get to speak to our clients who have worked with us to do various things, oftentimes doing big things. And that is definitely what Erin did, because she went for it. And we did a full-blown studio in her home. And here to tell us about it, of course, is Erin herself, Erin Culpepper. How you doing, Erin?
Great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. We worked together on this project for a considerable amount of time. It was probably from the first time we spoke to my last sound check approval. It was more than a year, right?
I was like looking back at the exact dates before we hopped on here together. I booked you in the fall of 2020, and we just went through so many contractors, I feel like, just trying to find one that would do it for us. And so that was like a frustration, not from you in any aspect, but from my end, just finding someone. I was like, look, I have George put together like literally detailed specs for someone to follow. Like, I just need someone to build it. And so that took a very long time, but we finally found a really awesome guy.
That's great. You want to plug him?
In the summer of 2020. Yeah, his name is Jason Cohan. I remember you joking with me. You're like, I think this is the one, Erin. I think that he's going to put a ring on it. Not in the literal sense, of course, because I'm married, and he was awesome. He had some guys that he like got in on the project. One is a drummer in a local band down here, and then another one was a retired DJ. So they had some acoustical background.
That helps a lot.
If you
Before you go further, where is down here? Where are you located again?
Oh, Wilmington, North Carolina. Yeah, so on the coast of North Carolina. Yeah.
That's right. I keep forgetting my cousin lives there. Yeah, and my uncle. Yeah. That was definitely, and it always, almost always, is the hardest part of these projects for the client is to find the right contractor. It can be very exasperating and time-consuming. So I'm really glad that you did find a good team. That is huge.
Yeah, and they were great, and you are just so amazing in terms of, well, one, your patience, just with the whole process. You talked to contractors before this one, and then they just fell through, and so we had to like do it all over again. And so I just really appreciated your time and commitment to that, because that's extra work for you that shouldn't have been.
That's part of the job. We have at any time 10 to 15 or sometimes more projects a little bit like yours, all going on at the same time, stretching even longer in time span, if you can believe that. And so that is, it's part of the job. It's part of the cost of doing the business. And maintaining that communication over a very long period of time is a big part of it. So
for sure,
it's not a concern for me. I just knowing that I know what you guys are going through and getting through that process. So I just want to make sure that things just keep moving, no matter how long that it takes.
Yeah, that I just really appreciated that component. And you're always like, anytime they need to hop on a Zoom with me. I know we like FaceTimed like up here in the middle of the project one time when we were having questions about like the ERV system. And so that was just so helpful. And it's just like, if I had the budget to like fly you out here every time we needed a check-in, I would have done that. But that's like the next best thing. And, it's like you're right here with us. So,
it's the most practical thing. Really awesome. It's what we can do quickly. And we do this all over the country, wherever you are. That's a big part of how we do what we do. And I've had people ask me about coming out, and I said to them, I'd like to. The key part is, when do I come out? At what point of the job do I come out?
Mm-hmm.
And is it worth the cost? Because, it's time and it's transportation and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's once in a while I do get to visit and drop in on clients' jobs when I'm visiting or traveling or going to conferences, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a cool thing to be able to do. So in your case, why did you decide to take the plunge? Because you were a working voice actor prior to this pretty extensive project.
Yeah, I just felt like I was at the point in my career that I really just wanted the broadcast quality sound, right? And also now she's 4.5. At the time, she was much younger. And so I had a sound treated closet that I was working in, but I can't control when my child might have a tantrum. This was just my dream. And I remember just thinking, even like browsing on her website, I think I was just kind of like going through like, what kind of service do I need to like try to get like a better setup in the space that I wanted? And it was just literally like, I can do a custom design. And I was just like, add to cart. Like, that's what I wanted. And this was such a unique space, I think, to work in, because it's the room we built this in is called the Frog, which we might be the only area of the country that uses that term. It stands for finished.
I've never heard it.
It stands for finished room over the garage. So we had like those like sloped ceilings to deal with, and just kind of like a unique shape. I think it almost ended up as like a trapezoid, I feel like. But it's the perfect size for me, and I just love it so much.
Yeah, that's what's so cool about being able to do something custom, especially when you have a uniquely shaped space, is being able to fit it into that space, still have access to your window. And I'll try to show some pictures later in this reel so people can see what the layout is, the floor plan, how there's an interesting carve out in the booth so that you can see out your window, all that stuff.
Yeah, I love that we built the window and there's natural light coming in, because it makes the space feel bigger and I just don't feel as isolated.
Yeah, that's really important. When you do work really full time, or most of your time when you're not with being a mom, and you're in the booth, you want to feel connected to the outside. You want to know what's going on. And do you ever occasionally have a little face sticking up through the window?
Sometimes she likes to follow me in here for sure. But
part most of the time
project,
you lock the door out in the hall, right?
Yeah, it's locked right now, but that's okay. Her dad's taking care of her.
Okay.
But I enjoyed the part of the very beginning of the project when, before we even started like the specs, we did a bunch of sound checks just for the space to see what type of treatment we needed. And so that included, I had to get my husband like going with the lawnmower outside.
Oh, yeah.
I did I had to wait for a thunderstorm. We did a recording during a thunderstorm. I made my husband and daughter scream and run around downstairs. So I just thought that was a really fun part of the project and not something I would have thought of, but custom.
That's a really important part of it, the information gathering phase. And it's a long-term project to do, right? So getting the information is going to be part of that process. And so we have a good idea of how far we have to go with this project in terms of construction and design. And we went pretty far for your project. This is a fully isolated room, decoupled from the rest of the house, a dedicated ventilation system. By the way, how's the ventilation system? Are you able to work comfortably?
I'm so comfortable, yes.
That's huge. That is huge. I see people's studio designs that they did or had somebody make all the time, and I'm like, how's the ventilation? And a lot of times they say, I have to turn off the fan when I record, or, I just opened the door. I don't need ventilation. I'm like, okay, well, that might work for some of you and some of the time. But yeah, when you really are in there more than 20, 30 minutes and you're trying to get work done, you have to stop and take a breather and get fresh air. It's just another thing that distracts you from getting work done.
Yes, absolutely.
Other than finding the contractor, what was probably one of the bigger challenges of the actual process of building the space?
Just being patient, I guess.
Yeah.
I was like, they were like, we can get this done in 2 weeks. And I was like, perfect. And,
That would be
I
a
think,
miracle.
yes, it was, I think, almost like exactly 2 years, like almost to the day when it was finally done, which
Yeah.
is fine. Like we had to work around like my schedule and everything. So that's certainly understandable. And I was a little bit of a control freak because you weren't here and I
Right.
was wanting them to follow every direction to a T. And they were
Yeah.
like, well, what if we do something like this? And I'm like, well, we need to check with George first. So,
Yeah, good for
so
you. Well,
that,
that is what it takes because we are working remotely. Obviously, I can't be on the job site all the time or really ever and just check in. It does take for you, the owner of the studio, the owner of the home, to be your own advocate and step up and keep an eye on what's going on. And sometimes that doesn't happen for the actor owner and things don't get done quite right. We have to take a back step backwards or the thing gets done and there's some major compromises because a little detail wasn't looked over, right? So
yeah.
you obviously
And
did your job very well.
well, and you made it easy where you in the instructions were like, you need to stop here. We need to do like a check-in before we put in the drywall. I think you had told me some horror stories like where the drywall was finished and you're like, we
Yeah.
have to tear this down and start over.
It's either tear this out and redo it or this is just the way it's going to be and you're going to hear your kids
Yeah.
running down the hall in your studio every single time.
Yes.
Right. Is there anything you do here in your studio like that would ever stop you from recording?
What do you mean by that?
Like a really loud sound from either inside the house or outside the house.
Oh.
And I'm assuming if you're in your studio and you hear something loud enough to startle you, it
Yeah.
must be pretty like a thunderclap or something
I
really
mean,
loud.
yeah, I feel like there's very little that would make me stop recording. I think,
Yeah.
like right before we started, my husband came home and I could like hear the garage a little bit. So,
Yeah,
maybe
you heard
something
the
like
garage
that.
door opener machinery.
Yeah, like I could like kind of feel the rumble almost.
Yes.
I'm not sure it's something that would make me stop recording. And it's also something that I can just like wait 5 seconds for and then just restart. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's I would say for anybody else doing a frog studio, that's a great name for it.
Yes.
Doing a frog, and I realized now we've probably done a few frog studios actually, is that's the one thing that's probably going to be nearly impossible to stop completely.
Yeah.
Because there's a huge amount of machinery, all the rollers, the tracks, the motor, the whole thing. That's all transmitting vibration through the ceiling and into your studio. To get rid of all of that is very difficult. So I'm glad it works that well that you can, most of the time you can record right on through it and it doesn't even interrupt you, which is pretty awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
tell me a little bit more about you. So you've been, how long have you been working in voiceover until you decided to take the plunge for this big studio project?
Gosh, I've always been just, my full-time job is a veterinarian. And the voice acting has always been a side gig for me. And it's always been a goal of mine to make it more of a full-time career. And so I've slowly been working towards that over the years. I got into voiceover like way back in the day in like 2008, I think.
Do you have some acting background?
No, it's a really weird story. I was at a restaurant in Orlando, and I'm sure me now, but anyone listening, I'm sure can already tell, like, I'm bubbly, like, I giggle and laugh a lot. And so we were out at a restaurant, and I was, like, probably talking to a friend and maybe being a little, like, boisterous with my voice. And so this like stranger comes over to the table and I was like, oh gosh, like she's gonna tell us, please be quiet, you're disturbing our dinner. And she was like, hey, like I'm sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to like I noticed your voice and like I work on The Simpsons and I wish I knew who it was. Like in hindsight I was just like staring at her.
Right.
And she was like, I just think like you should look into doing voiceovers for projects that need like younger sounding voices.
Yeah.
It's hard to get kids and with like good acting ability. Like
That's
you should look into doing this.
And kids,
like, it was just
kids grow up, their voices change.
Yeah.
Right?
And so I was just like, gosh, like I never even thought about that. Like, and so
Was this
I just
person
like,
an actor on the show or a producer? Or
I don't
did they
know.
say anything?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I
they just
know.
said
I
I
was
work
like,
on The Simpsons or something?
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously,
wish
they
I
recognize a
knew.
unique and interesting voice when they hear one, and it really perked them up. Like, I got to see who this
Yeah.
woman is. So
Yeah.
that is
So,
pretty. We definitely hear the trope. You have a great voice. You should try voiceover. You
mm-hmm.
definitely don't hear the somebody from the Simpsons show heard my
Yeah.
voice and thought,
I know.
your voice could work. That's pretty reassuring. So from that point on,
Yeah.
you're like, I need to look into this
Yeah,
thing.
and I just love it so much. With the scientific background, it's like a great outlet for me to
Yeah.
use the creative side of my brain, and
Yeah.
I
A
just
real opposite, a real departure, right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So with that unique voice you have, what are some of the things you're getting to work on, either past or maybe things you
Yeah.
can't talk about, but things in the past, things that you've booked, things that you particularly stand out in your mind that you enjoyed working on?
Yeah, I do a lot of like mobile gaming stuff. One of the more like recognized companies I've worked for is Crayola. I do a voice on their app called Crayola Create and Play. And it's actually funny because I'm working with Mark Scott right now, and
Great.
he was
Good
telling
choice.
me he was telling me how his daughter like plays this Crayola game like every day. She climbs into his bed and like plays it. I was like, oh,
Oh,
that's
really?
me, Mark.
No way. He must have laughed so hard when
Yeah. We were joking about it yesterday because I'm in his mastermind group this year. And I was like, I think the only reason like you let me in is because you would have just felt guilty hearing my voice every day when your daughter played the game. But yeah, I don't know. I'm still like working on my marketing and building my business up.
I still am too.
Yes.
Yes.
But I just love any project. It's just like an ego boost when you audition and you get the gig, even
Yeah.
if it's a small one.
It
I
really
just
is
get
because
it
you're
every
being
time.
heard against hundreds of other voices,
Yeah,
even on the
Mhm.
small gigs,
exactly.
right? What's the one gig where you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the Crayola is a big one. That's a big one. What's
That
one that
one,
is another one that stands out? You're like, oh my gosh, I can't
um,
believe I'm the voice of, or I'm doing this voice.
I think like my first booking on Voice 123 when I was like, oh my gosh, like I won against like 50 people. Like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
was a book trailer for Dork Diaries that Simon Kids produced. And so, which is like a children's genre, of course. And I don't know, I was just very excited that I had gotten that audition. So, yeah, I don't know. I feel like being interviewed by George Whittam right now, I'm like, I think I've made it. Like, this is my I've made it moment.
That's pretty cool of you to say. That's silly, but thank you. Well, what's something you could say to people watching this? Hopefully, they made it this far into the video, who are thinking about doing what you did in terms of like making that big expense and taking that
Yeah.
big step. What would you
Oh.
say to them?
Do it. Go to your site, click add to cart, do it. Zero regrets. Like I said, I think the hardest part for me was just like I knew it was going to be amazing because it's you. And the hardest part was just waiting to get it done. But it's just, I don't know, it just gives you such peace of mind to know you're, in beautiful space, like a broadcast quality space. You don't have to worry about interruptions. Yeah, it's just perfect.
That's wonderful. You mentioned the space, but we didn't talk about gear at all. We don't have to go down the rat hole too far.
Yeah.
But just tell me about what you're looking at a mic right now. What kind of mic is it, and why did you choose it? And then what else you're using?
Yeah, I was using a Bluebird XLR for a while, and I was happy with that mic, but I've always coveted the Neumann TLM 103, and so
Yeah.
I just upgraded to that this year, and we did, a sound check with it, and
And it did sound better.
yeah, I thought
Sometimes
it
buying a more
sounded really
expensive
good.
mic is a lateral move, or it just
Mhm.
doesn't sound that much different or better. In this case, I think you got lucky. Again, just because you buy a better mic doesn't mean it will sound better, but for you, it really did sound better. It was smoother, clearer. Actually, I was able to undo a lot of the EQ corrections and things that I'd done before. It really sounds excellent in that space.
I'm so happy with it, and I think like even this past month, and you and I talked about this, like even if it's just the placebo effect, I think it's just given me more confidence, and I've just had more bookings like this past month than I've had over 6 months before. So
How do you track
so
your
happy.
bookings? Do you have a CRM? Do you do anything special, or do you just have a spreadsheet?
I am using Nimble right now. I have tried to use Nimble before and just never got like a really good workflow. But this month I got it down. I'm able to really like do good trackings with my marketing and my auditions, my bookings, my leads, and all of that. And I'm happy with it.
That's a nice tool of the trade suggestion there for everybody else listening to check out Nibble. I haven't used that one, but there are so many. And when you find the right tool for the job, it is like gold when you find something that really works for you. It's so important.
For sure.
Well, it's been great having you on my little profile video and on the YouTubes. And I'm really proud of your results. I'm really glad to see how happy you are with it. Very happy for you. And where are they going to find you when it's time to book your unique voice?
Yes, just head on over to my website, erinculpepper.com, and you can find me there.
Awesome. Got to get in that plug. You've been plugging me the whole time. It's your turn.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Erin.